Hey, what's up, everyone? We're taking a look at the slate, 6 game slate for January 30th, 2020. And as always, we like to look at game by game and take a look at the matchups, who's in, who's out in that game, and who might be some good plays for that game. Right off the bat, we have Charlotte and Washington. Both teams have been pretty weak in the interior this year, to say the least. Charlotte, probably the slightly better team defensively on the perimeter. So with Bradley Beal at 9.4, I still think he's definitely in play, but I don't think he has as much upside in this particular matchup as he does in others. The big plus for someone like Beal is that he's playing a high volume of minutes and takes a high volume of shots. So it's not too hard for him to get to like 40 fantasy points, and he definitely has like 60 plus upside points at times. But you see, he has plenty of games here where he was playing, this was after I think he got injured, so he was coming back from injury and he was kind of working back up on his minutes. So now he's back up to a big 38 minutes. But he does occasionally have games like this, like versus Cleveland, where he only played 29 minutes. He still had 51 fantasy points there. Not an amazing spot for Beal, but he's definitely still in play in tournaments. Devontae Graham should be a really solid option. I don't know when the last time he actually had a really big game. It's been a while, but he's been playing a lot of like slower, more stout defensive teams. He only went 1 for 8 from the field, so his field goal shooting has kind of been suspect recently. At some point, he should bounce back, though, and he does tend to have pretty high assist numbers. You can see he had 10 assists in this game, so he has double-double potential. He can have games where he scores quite a few points, too. Looking at these game logs, he does look like a guy who you would want to steer away from, but I do think this could be actually a big bounce-back spot. Milwaukee's the number 1 rated defense in the league. Orlando plays at a slow pace and is pretty solid defensively. Denver also a good defensive team. It could be a case of him having some midseason blues, but if you look at right before that 4-game stretch against Portland, he had 52. Against Phoenix, he had 44. So I think it's more of the case of matchup specifically with him. And if he's playing a solid 36 minutes, he takes like 15 or 16 shots, makes half of them, and gets to that kind of line like this, he definitely has the upside still at 7.7. So definitely a tournament play, not someone you'd want to play in cash, but he's an interesting play, I think, tomorrow. Same goes for Terry Rozier. I think both of these guys at their prices in like the mid 7K have upside against a team like Washington. If I knew some of these guys were getting minutes in the interior, though, I would also want to play them for Charlotte. PJ Washington jumps out as me as a guy who could definitely have a really big game against a team like Washington who's weak in the interior. At 5.4, he's got definitely like 35, 40 plus point upside if he's going to be playing the minutes, taking advantage of the weak interior for Washington. Bertans is up to 6.2. I don't necessarily like perimeter guys too much for Washington, but it's not necessarily that bad of an idea to get some kind of a game stack going on here. Cody Zeller at 5K. I wish I really knew what kind of minutes he would be playing. Played 29. You can see his minutes are kind of all over the place. He goes from 30 to 16 to 21. So at 5K though, I think he's viable, especially against a team like Washington. Like he could get to the rim, make some free throws, do all those sorts of things. I don't think this is necessarily a spot for Malik Monk, but you never know. He has his big games, but he has too icy of a floor for me to want to roster him too often. Jordan McRae is out, which should boost Ish Smith's minutes at 4.6. He's in play, but I don't think he has too much upside in this particular matchup. And these rest of these guys I'm not too certain about. So in this particular game, I'd look for Graham or Rozier, take your pick. I do kind of like spending it for Graham. I do think this is a spot where he could really have a monster game. And then on the Washington side, or also PJ Washington, I should say. And then, but outside of Beal, I don't know if I have too much interest in these Washington guys, but could be a spot for someone like Bertans if he's going to just, go hog wild and make a bunch of shots. But what's Thomas Bryant? Because Thomas Bryant, is he working back up? Okay, so Thomas Bryant looks like he got 32 minutes So at 5.2, he's actually grossly underpriced in this particular matchup. So sorry, I might have looked over him. It's pretty late at night. I'm popping a Red Bull right now. But I would say in general, Graham, Washington, and then Beal and Bryant kind of seem like the best picks for me, with Terry Rozier and someone like Zeller or Bertans as honorable mentions. Looking over to the next game, we got Toronto at Cleveland. Toronto should kind of wipe the floor here. Cleveland does not play at very fast pace. Toronto plays at kind of a reasonable up-tempo pace, but I don't expect this to be too high scoring of a game. Not sure what the over-under is yet. Siakam should be in a good matchup at 8.4. I think he's in play. Van Fleet is in play. Lowry's in play. Kevin Love, if he's still getting solid minutes, should be in play, but 24 and 26 minutes is not going to cut it, especially against Toronto. And I think he had a game against Toronto earlier this year where he didn't do too well. 27 points in 27 minutes. So not too sure what to make of that. I don't know if he's on his way out, if they're getting ready to trade him. What's going on with Kevin Love? Ibaka off the bench at 7.1 is kind of too much. I mean, he had some big games when Siakam was out, obviously. But now that he's been back, he had this big game versus Atlanta where they kind of, he played 27 minutes, and Atlanta's obviously terribly weak in the interior. He's probably able to get to the rim a lot and all that sort of stuff. But I really don't anticipate that necessarily happening here. So I think 7-1's too much for him. Unless Tristan Thompson were out, he's not. So the rest of these guys, take your pick. Norman Powell, I think, is too expensive. OG is kind of like, meh. He just is not that much of an offensive player, especially with Van Fleet and Siakam and Lowry healthy. He's just not an option on the offense, really. Chetty never does much, and this is a good defensive matchup. Someone like Chris Boucher off the bench, I guess you could take a bullet on if you really want to, but with RHJ and Ibaka and those guys, I don't know if Boucher's really getting any minutes or anything. So I would say in general, you could probably look to some of these starting guys for Toronto, and that's probably about it for me. Not too much to love from that game. Atlanta-Philly should be an awesome spot for Joel Embiid. He should dominate the center. If he's playing full minutes especially. Looks like he played 26 versus Golden State in his initial return back from his hand injury. So, if I knew he were playing 30 minutes, I definitely would consider giving him a go. Simmons at 8.9, I think with Embiid back, is a little too pricey for me. John Collins at 7.8 is viable, but it's not a great matchup, so I don't think I would spend at 7.8 for him. Tobias Harris at 7K flat is definitely in play. Al Horford questionable. With Josh Richardson out, that makes me like Tobias Harris even more. And then someone like Thibault. If Josh Richardson is out, I think Thibault is more than viable. Only played 24 minutes here. He's a guy that, if you haven't watched him play, he's got a pretty decent amount of athleticism. The only one downside to him is he's on a team with, Embiid, Simmons, Tobias Harris, Richardson, Al Horford. So, and he's a younger guy, but he has potential. And if you ever see guys where all of a sudden they have a big game, who's it against? It's usually against a team like Atlanta. So I wouldn't mind taking a shot on someone like Thibault, because I don't think he's going to be very highly owned. But the rest of the guys, maybe even Korkmaz. But I think I like Thibault better. I think he has more upside. Korkmaz can definitely shoot the rock sometimes, but I think he's got more of a floor, and I think Thibault can be a little more consistent and round things out a little bit better. And then on the Atlanta side, like I said, there's pretty much Trae Young, but none of these matchups are that great for Atlanta guys. So if you want to dart throw on someone like, I don't know, Cam Reddish or Alex Len, looks like he isn't even playing, Damian Jones, I don't know. I just wouldn't go there with any of these guys from Atlanta against Philly. Boston Golden State, D. Russell is at 8K. Came off a 50-pointer here against, who did they play? That was against Philly. Okay, so, but he chucks a lot. You see 22 field goal attempts. was able to get some boards and assists to go along with that, as long with a couple steals, so getting to 50 fantasy points there. Pretty nice game. Kemba Walker at 7-9 should be firmly in play. That's a pretty good spot. Tatum, questionable with a groin. Groins are never good, man. Groins suck. They can really linger for a couple weeks, so not really sure if he's going to be playing. If he's not playing, that definitely makes me really like Kemba. Gordon Hayward at 7-5. He's definitely, active out there on the court. He had some big games versus Orlando and Miami here where he had a really high field goal percentage against Miami especially. So if Tatum's out, definitely likes me like Jaylen Brown, Gordon Hayward, Kemba Walker. All these guys are in pretty good spots, so take your pick. Cantor's out, so the minutes for Tice have been up quite a bit. You can see he's been playing 30-plus minutes in all of these matchups. At 6-1, though, I'm not sure if I like it too much, simply because they have these other weapons on the offense. I don't think they have much of a ceiling for someone like him at that price point. And then the other side of the ball, like Draymond, Burks, I think they're viable and in play. I especially like Alec Burks, actually. Like, this to me is just like the kind of setup where he's going to have like 40 or 50. I can just feel it. It just kind of makes sense. In these kind of matchups where the defense is pretty solid, someone like Burks likes to, just kind of get after it and get to the free throw line and, make some shots and all those sorts of things. Glenn Robinson tends to be pretty passive. Damian Lee, if he can have a big rebounding game, I guess he can get there, but I don't know why they decided, oh yeah, we want to go after Damian Lee. I'm not necessarily too impressed with him, but that's just me. And then for the rest of these guys, like, I'm not really too big on anyone else. Maybe a Wanamaker if you want a cheap guy at 3.1K if you think, he gets extra minutes or whatever. But really for me, the star of the game would be probably Kemba. I think he can get 50 plus quite often here. And then Brown and Hayward are definitely in play. And then Burks and Green would be the two guys from Golden State that I'd look at. Sacramento versus Clippers. Sacramento is playing tonight, so they're on a back-to-back. Looks like Paul George is questionable, so is he going to make his return here? He's listed as probable for Thursday's game, so he's going to make his return from, I guess, a hamstring injury that's been plaguing him at 8-2. I don't know what kind of minutes he's going to be playing, so that's a tough one. I don't necessarily like Kawhi at 10-8. De'Aaron Fox, though, at 7.6. Sign me up for some of that. I definitely think he's viable. Harrell at 6'9 is probably okay, but I'm not like too thrilled about going there necessarily. I think he's got a good floor, but I don't know how much of a ceiling he has. Especially, he can get there, I guess, maybe, but I'm not thrilled about it. Lou at 6'8, I guess. Then we got Bielitsa on the other side of the ball. Landry Shamet at 5K, that's not, I would never touch that. Zubac is always kind of interesting. You don't know if he's going to play like mid to upper 20s minutes or just get these teens kind of minutes. So that's always a question mark. And with Paul George coming back, I think that might bump his usage down a little bit. But sometimes he just starts and gets hot and can play the beginning of the game and beginning of the second half and put up some numbers pretty quickly. I mean, they play pretty unselfish ball, the Clippers do. I mean, Kawhi can be a ball hog for good reason, though, because, I mean, he's basically matchup proof. So, in general, I actually don't really love this game. I tend to think that Sacramento really kind of slows the pace down. The Clippers kind of play to the pace of their opponent, honestly. They can win in any fashion. They're probably, in my opinion, the best team in the league. So, I don't know. Beverly questionable, it looks like he's probable. So if they have Beverly back and Paul George back, it kind of spreads the usage out amongst all these guys on the Clippers. So, I mean, take your pick and good luck, but I really don't necessarily love any of them. But on the other side of the ball, I think you can take a shot on De'Aaron Fox or Buddy Hield. Bagley, if he's back in the mix, not really sure. But this is a game where you want to keep up on the news and figure things out. But in general, not too many bargains here necessarily, but I do think De'Aaron Fox can have some big upside. But with Beverly back, who knows? Maybe he gets pestered by Pat Bev quite a bit. Then we got Denver, Utah. Should be a pretty good spot for some of these Denver guys. Utah is going to be on a back-to-back, I believe. I don't know. You have to double check that. Will Barton at 6K flat kind of jumps out to me a little bit as a pretty big bargain with Jamal Murray still out. 6K flat is pretty cheap for this guy. He only took 8 and 10 shots in these last 2 games. That's a pretty low shot count for someone like him. And he's just had some kind of poorish performances recently, and his minutes have been, I don't know. I just think his numbers are too low for what he's capable of. And he's definitely a really good tournament play. I think at 6K he's firmly in play. I like him in this matchup. I think he can have a really big game here. I think some of his numbers are reflective of the fact that Michael Porter Jr. is in the mix and been taking a lot more shots and play more minutes and stuff like that than he was at the beginning of the year when he basically wasn't playing. So now he's healthy and they're bringing him into the mix. I don't think the usage for Barton is probably quite there as much. On the other side of the ball, Gobert at 8-1 seems like kind of like a steal, but Denver does play kind of slower pace and probably not as many opportunities for him to get boards and do things, so who knows. Kind of an interesting slate, so it doesn't seem like there's too many bargains out there, too much stuff. I think I really like the Charlotte Washington. I like some Philly guys, so we'll start with these guys, and there's a few guys from this Golden State Boston game that I like as well. So if we were to try to build something out here. All right, this is a squad I ended up coming up with. Kemba and Tice for Boston. Really, it was tough for me to figure out who to put in at center. That was kind of one of the crux of my difficulties here. Not really sure on the minutes Embiid is going to play, and Jokic at 10-1 seems a little expensive. Don't really like the pace of the Toronto game versus Cleveland for Siakam. Rudy Gobert versus Denver is not a great matchup. And then you have John Collins versus Philly, which is not a great matchup. Embiid seems a little pricey. So I just came to the point where with Cantor out, he's getting 30 minutes. And even though he doesn't necessarily have a big ceiling, I think if I combine him with Kemba against Golden State, maybe those guys, if it goes OT or like if they get some chemistry going, there could be some positive correlation there. And then on the other side of the ball, I went with Draymond Green and Alec Burks. So I definitely have kind of a game stack there going on. Then we got Tobias Harris, PJ Washington for Charlotte, along with Terry Rozier. And then I rounded things out with Thomas Bryant, who's probably way too cheap. I could probably fool around with this and put Bryant at center. Maybe not necessarily play PJ Washington or something else, but this should be something. So thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you next time.